Welcome to the Doom is Dead podcast, a show all about how dead Doom is. I'm your host, Human Bones, and I'll be your guide as we make our way through the graveyard of this once great game that absolutely nobody enjoys today. Speaking with us today is renowned mapper and owner of the classic Doom multiplayer Discord server, Decay. As a member of the Mechanix Union, Decay's maps are featured in Velocity CTF, Rage CTF, DBAB, Progressive Duel, Neon DM, and many, many more. Doom is Dead is sponsored by In the Keep and the Drowned God Cathala. A very special guest today. His name is Decay. Welcome, Decay.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I don't really know when we first met. I think maybe for you and me, I think you and Do probably have a bit of a longer history than the two of us, but I think the first time that we started talking to each other was during the IDL mapping contest in like 2011, right? I mean,
The first time I talked to you, I'm pretty sure, because that was really my first foray into the Damon, and I think Otomex at the time as well. And I was never really good enough to be in the IDL, so I never really went into those circles. So that was the first time that I started talking to you and Do, I think, at the same time, because he had a lot of things to say about my maps, particularly my texturing.
that was probably, I would say, I started criticizing your maps around Rage CTF, not as much IDL CTF. I wasn't that much involved in that, but I vividly remember like going over Rage CTF and like
Velocity for sure.
Right, Velocity. Yeah. You're right. Velocity and your maps and Dusk's maps. Those were like some really colorful endeavors.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I mean, that was definitely one of the very first forms of actual map criticism I had gotten, because it was my second quote-unquote project. The first one being Machine Shop Duel, which was just a series of like first foray into mapping at all. And nobody really gave much feedback on those maps. They just said they sucked and never played them. So kind of just moved on from that. And when you actually gave feedback to the maps, that was like the first real feedback that I'd actually received up to that time.
Right, yeah, it was like I tried to focus on gameplay and everything, because that's what I pride myself in like providing. But in the end, I couldn't not comment on the way like all the maps were really mixing a lot of textured themes and wild colors. Back then,
it's kind of like one word sticks out, and every single time it's garish. And every single time I was like, what in the fuck is that supposed to mean? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's such just that at that time you really went wild with just this area should be like this sort of vivid green, and then the next area is this sort of vivid red, and you can kind of like see both those areas at once, and it just clashed visually. And so the word garish was there.
Well, I don't think you've made it in the Doom community as a mapper until you've been properly criticized by Do.
I mean, like it was interesting, because it's like, this is the first time anyone's ever said anything about this to me, so let's try and figure this out. So it was good. It was a good introduction to the IDL scene, I guess, into competitive mapping, that sort of sense. So it kind of gave me a glimpse into what people were really looking for, rather than doing my own thing.
And by the way, it's actually like I was critical of sense of velocity, but I also saw like a lot of good in it, to the extent that actually when velocity came out, like it didn't get any recognition in at Doomworld in CAC Awards, and actually at that year, just I think they had Caesar do the multiplayer award, and he gave it to Who Done It, which is okay. That's a very solid prize. But I was like kind of like angry because there was like no uh, recognition to the actual stuff that was also like played in CTF or in the wider multiplayer community. Like Zazer pretty much said, "Yeah, I have no fucking clue besides who done it." So I was raising a lot of noise because at that year there were like several projects that I was like, these things could have been given a multiplayer award, but you guys just ignored it. So they eventually just relented, and they brought me on the team and gave me like 3 awards, like a space for a full page of multiplayer awards. So basically, I used velocity as kind of a ramp to actually promote multiplayer stuff more in Doomworld. So there you go. There's kind of like
that's my contribution by accident is
right.
that multiplayer page. I mean, it was a shame because public CTF at that time, we're talking in like 2011, 2012, was really on the decline, especially in Skulltag at the time. Like you could never find a public CTF game. So
right, we're talking 2012, 2013, right?
Yeah, but it was like one of the design philosophies behind Velocity was like, okay, let's make these maps applicable for 3 versus 3, not just because that was the standard for competition, but also because there were so very few people playing public CTF, so they needed to be good enough for people to play with a low amount of players, but at the same time just like keep them there and then still be suitable for like maybe up to 5v5. So they kind of worked down that way. And it was a shame because it's like in the Damon in particular, it got a lot of playtime. Like I don't know how many rotations I would go through, especially on weekends, be like 2 or 3 rotations, and with 32 maps, it's like that's not an insignificant amount of time being played. And it was pretty constant. I was actually really happy with the reception that it got in Z Damon. So definitely when it didn't win a cackle, it's like, I mean, I was only just being introduced to that sort of stuff at the time. So it's like, it didn't really dawn on me or like make much effect, but it was like, oh, well, it could have been here. And it's nice to at least get a shout out in that page. So, but it did like kind of set my sights higher for the next project, I guess you could say.
So well, it was a happy incident.
Yes. The way that I would describe the IDL mapping contest would be like, going to a yard sale.
IDL mapping contest, that's 2011. So that's even prior to that. And that was basically like when IDL was still in like the full strength, really going strong, and we decided to run a mapping contest with like tapping our inner talent, like the people who were actually playing. We asked them to make maps because we needed to expand the map pool, and we were like not particularly content with what we had from stuff like 32 and 24 or the same old maps from ZTTF. So that was
the first
our
kind
idea.
of community WOD that we had done. And you interrupted a really bad joke, but because I want to say it, I'm going to say it anyway. It's like going to a yard sale and pushing through someone's little teddy bear that's burnt or something that they're trying to sell for 25 cents to find like the nice leather couch that maybe you're going to get as a discount. So that's how I looked at the mapping contest. Was you have a set of players that really had never mapped before, submitting maps to us, which is great. But not just anyone can map. So I think for me, I noticed, and you mentioned also Dusk, but I noticed Decay's maps as the ones that had the most potential. And
right, yeah, you could
I think he
instantly
took some
like
of those maps.
there was a lot of hit and miss in that map set.
And you know what the real kicker was? You say it's like you noticed my map and Dust maps, and it's like none of them won. They were the shittiest maps ever that won. Sid
Well,
like
let
really?
me tell you what happened. Right? So I went through, there was a lot of political nonsense going on at that time between myself, I was the commissioner of the IDL at the time, and the rest of the board. So I went through the WAD after it was done, and they had left it up to me to choose the winner. And so I went through and I chose, I think maybe we were choosing 3 winners, and I'm pretty sure I chose one map of yours, one map of Dusk's, and then another map. I think it was Alex, something Epic 3, actually. And the board flipped out. They were like, I cannot believe that you've picked these maps, and we're going to overrule. And I was like, you know what? I'm ready to jump off a bridge, so you guys can just go ahead and do whatever you want to do. And they picked maps that I would not have chosen. So it's no surprise to me that your maps ended up being released in Velocity CTF, because they were the layouts were the most well put together.
Dude,
the textures were the greatest. Velocity CTF is actually the only WAD I've ever reviewed on Doom World. I did a map by map review. Do you know how long that took me? And I put like 2 paragraphs per map. I mean, my review took up that entire new stuff thread. So, I was really a big fan and proponent of Velocity CTF. And so it's been super awesome to see how that sort of evolved into DBAB.
I would actually, I'm not prepared for this conversation because I don't know how I voted on the IDLC competition maps.
Oh, I've tattooed the votes on my arm.
Because at this point,
I think you were the outlier that agreed with me.
Yeah, because I was rooting for Velocity. I was really like as I said, I was really fighting for Velocity to get a kick award, and then when it wasn't even considered, I kicked up a fuss, and I actually got on the fucking kick award committee to actually be in charge on multiplayer awards. So I think like I was probably sympathetic, but I mean, I can vividly remember I was really upset with Sidaz being, one of the winners.
Grindiest, plainest pieces of shit.
Yeah. That was. I was definitely not, cool with that. But I'm not sure which maps I was actually promoting as winners.
Oh, I know you loved one of Dust's maps, and Hell Captured. That map was like your baby.
I think I was also fine with the Caution map, the flat one, which is kind of like made it. The map made it kind of like into the standard rotation. If you remember which one that is, with the soul sphere. With the soul sphere in the middle, the kind of like blocking elevators for the side routes.
That was the actual winner.
Map.
Yeah, Collisions map.
Yeah, that one. I think I was okay with that map. Like,
yeah,
okay,
that's a pretty okay map. It's just very plain.
It's the most
but okay.
One, it's like something that would have come out during ZDCTF 1. Like, there wasn't a lot of ingenuity to it.
Or 3224. Like, just whip this out in like 4 hours or whatever.
And that's probably why they liked it, because it was just simple and they didn't have to think. Now I think we've.
It's a map I can't complain about.
It's a map,
and it's like kind of like when actually the map you can't complain about is the winner of your competition. It's like kind of like maybe it wasn't such a success, the overall project.
Right. And I mean, it's like how you say, I have it started off as a really good idea, and then it turned out to just be an idea, so it started off probably as a pretty good map, and then it's just a map. So I don't know. I do not feel vindicated even though Velocity CTF is arguably much more popular than that map.
Right, yeah. It's just that Velocity didn't make it into like the competitive rotations. Like I don't think any of the Velocity maps is actually in the wider map pool of stuff that gets picked for competition. Which
the only mainstay was Charon Orbit, the one that DS loved.
Right. And I would say maybe with a bit of balancing, making a version 2 or whatever, that could be rectified. But on the other hand, you went on to make other maps. It just progressed over and on. So it's probably not necessary. But yeah, it's like they were good maps, and none of them actually managed to lodge themselves into the actual competitive scenes.
Well, here's the thing about that. It's like it's one thing as a mapper when you grow and you make other maps,
right?
You get steadily better here and there. When I actually revisited Velocity not too many years back, I think just 2017 or something like that, and I was going through the maps because I was thinking about like what would I change here and there, and most of the maps are actually like there's fatal flaws in each of them, and it's like in each of the maps there's a flaw that would make it inappropriate for competitive or private play. And you don't really notice those things until you go back as a seasoned CTF player. Like, for example, those were my first CTF maps, and I was not really a seasoned CTF player at that point. I wasn't as good, so it's like you don't recognize those things until you go back to them some years later. I'm glad the public enjoyed them, but in reality, it's like I'm not surprised that they didn't end up in too many competitive map packs because there's just too many flaws to justify them.
So, I mean, just going back to them and fixing them wouldn't even be justified because at this point, you don't even like see those fatal flaws, and those fatal flaws make it pretty much like impossible to fix those maps completely. So it's better just to make new maps.
Well, I've always been of the opinion, especially in CTF, not so much in DM, but once a map has been determined to be not good, it doesn't matter what you do to it. It will never, ever be seen as good. Therefore, any fixes you do to it are a complete waste of time.
So
it's
basically,
it's a stigma. Yeah. It's dead after that. Once it gets condemned, that's it. It's done. Put it away.
And just focus all your attempts to the future and to your new attempts. Like, don't waste time rebalancing stuff that's been deemed not cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's one thing. It's like if it hasn't been played, really, you can get away with it. But if it's been played and people just remember it as bad, then you're fighting a lost battle. And especially in CTF today, it's even less fruitful because it's really how CTF is played is really monopolized. And unless it's played on like FNF or something like that, it's not going to get general public play. So it's not a good investment. Whereas like with the FFA WODs, such as Aeon and Neon, for whatever reason, you can find people playing that on their own. You don't need to start it. Whereas with CTF, you need to make that effort to actually start a public game.
Right, yeah. CDF, public CDF has pretty much died over the years. You had, like, in the past, you would have just spontaneous 2 servers running at all time, at least like on every port except Automax. But you would have always like 1 or 2 servers playing CTF on Zedemon or Zendronum, and this has disappeared. So yeah, I can see, like, yeah, you have to seed a game, and if you're seeding a game on flawed maps, that's an issue.
Exactly.
In saying all of that about Velocity CTF and even the IDL mapping contest, that was the first time that we had any contact. So I think any of your projects prior to that I was not really aware of. Did you have anything that came out before Velocity CTF?
Before Velocity, yeah, like I said, it was just this one duel set called Machine Shop Duel. It was a clan set. Basically, I guess it has to do really with my timeline in terms of actually joining Doom. I first started playing in I'm gonna be a memer just like everybody else and say, yeah, I first played Doom in the early '90s when I was like half a year old or whatever. No,
I swear that actually happened to me.
That's what a lot of people say. It's like, well, it's with few
My
exceptions. Most of
story
you
is
don't
unique.
remember.
Damn it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no. I tinkered around with it. I mean, I vaguely remember seeing my friend play Durango 6 Map 11 in Deathmatch on his computer. That's like the earliest exposure I had back in like
Your poor
1990.
friend.
Is
Durango
this
6 map
your
11.
frustration with Vango? Like is this the
No,
origin?
no, that is more, that's different. Anyway, so in 2007, my friend, who's actually a sound engineer at Microsoft, he reintroduced me to Doom, and we started playing a little bit. We played Skull Tag, we were doing the invasion stuff, and then he went his separate ways, and then I stopped playing. I came back in 2009, playing the mod All Out War, and before then, it's like I tinkered around with modding. Like I had Doom Builder 1. What a piece of garbage! Holy shit! But I was using it like Windows ME or something like that. It was bad. Everything I did got corrupted and destroyed. So I got frustrated with that, and then I came back in 2009 and was playing All at War, and then I decided to try out some other stuff. Got hooked in with some people, got introduced to the clan scene, and in that clan scene, uh, some people were doing like a clan project. I was like, oh, I actually like doing mapping and whatnot, so I'll try my hand at this. So it was a one-on-one set, and we just kind of did whatever. I mean, we didn't really hardly play test the maps. We just made maps and hope for the best. And it was a really interesting project. We got 35 maps out of it, tons of trash maps too. So I mean, like collectively, it would have probably been like 45 maps. But it was a great learning experience because we got a lot of judgment in terms of like playability versus looks and whatnot. Because I've been reading on the forums like there was a lot of arguing about ZDoom and ZDoomisms, and it's like gameplay versus aesthetic, and how a lot of maps at that time were focusing too much on how they looked, and as a result, they played like shit. So our philosophy was trying to blend the best of both worlds. It's like, well, there's no reason for us to stick to Durango 5 or like Green War levels of detail. I'm sure we can find a balance where it's like the maps look nice but also play nice. So that's what we tried to do, and we learned a lot. And then after that was the IDL mapping contest. So from there, that's kind of where we just went.
So you were actually like you lucked out on like being happy in the first stage where you got a lot of positive semi-positive feedback on the the mapping where you're just shitting out complete crap.
Yeah, well, it wasn't complete crap. I mean, certainly some of it was, but there a couple popular maps came out of that. I mean, they didn't really go anywhere, but I ran tournaments on this set back in like 2013, 2014, and people really did like the maps. So can't really say that it turned out too poorly.
Right? Yeah, it's just that like there's that. Like when you really like when you're new to the community and you make the first map and it gets crushed, and some people just pack it up and just go home because holy shit, I'll never be good. It's like so you avoided that by actually like being in a kind of like this climate where everyone was just so hyped up for we want this, we want the content, okay, this is not good, try again, but yeah, go ahead. Like reassuring you to like the cool positive feedback.
Yeah, it's like, it's weird because all I've ever heard, and a lot of it continued to this day, well, before I left the CTF scene and whatnot, is that people were tired of playing the same old maps over and over and over again. They wanted something new. Well, you give them something new, they don't like it. They shit on it. They just like completely discourage anyone from making maps. And people wonder, it's like, why is the multiplayer mapping scene dead? It's not a wonder. It's like, have you played with the people that you're making the maps for?
Right. Yeah. Now you're okay. So you've now moved from your beginnings with the people who were like really enthusiastic about playing anything, because the sheer excitement of playing Doom in any form or shape, and then progressing towards the competitive scene, the elites, and those guys, they don't want new stuff at all. They will,
even though they claim to.
Yeah, we want new stuff, but the new stuff has to be exactly as the old stuff. There shouldn't be anything new, because it's kind of like it's out of our comfort zone, and we don't like that.
Well, that's a really large, like, overall philosophical community discussion. I think it was probably a unique experience for someone like you, for someone new to come in and find a group of friends, and then within a short period of time decide that you were just going to make a WAD, and kind of encourage each other, and have a similar goal in mind with that dual WAD that you made, and from there, I mean, that probably, because of that, like, you were probably able to take criticism a little bit better from the community at large, and moving into Velocity and then even past Velocity. But the struggles with getting Velocity played by the masses, I think probably we realized, some of us, I think there are some people that do want genuinely new maps and new stuff to play, but it's hard. Their voice is not heard quite as loudly, and people who run things, people who run tournaments, people who are part of the scene, they just want, they look at the numbers, and they look at whether things are popular or accepted by whatever it is, 10, 15 people, and they decide what is viable for playing based on the opinion of a very small group of people. So I think, and we probably realized this a little too late maybe, but capitulating to a group of people like that will, like you said, eventually kill off the multiplayer mapping community. So you need to be able to say, well, you know what, we're not going to play such and such a map for the 5,000th time in a row. We're going to, push forward with these new maps. And I don't know. I mean, I think it was really bold, the direction that you took, despite all of these things that were essentially weighing you down. Having a community full of people that are just really stubborn about what they're playing. But I don't think that really stopped you. I mean, I think, like you said, you went back and you looked at Velocity. You're like, wow, I think I've gotten better as a mapper here, and you just kept going with your ideas. But yeah, I'm sorry. I know that's a larger discussion to have, but I think it just plays into your point. A lot of people don't want change, but sometimes you have to force it on them. So I think you've done a good job of saying, I'm an accomplished mapper, and I'm not just going to make, what you expect me to make. I'm going to continue to make things outside of the box. And, if that makes me an unpopular guy, I mean, maybe you're an unpopular person for other reasons, but if that makes me someone who's unpopular, then, whatever. But
actually, let's tie this back a little bit. it goes back to the development of, well, the creation of the MXU, like the Mechanix Union, because Machine Shop itself was a quote unquote competitive clan. And there was a whole idea like no multi-claning, that sort of thing. So we would lose mappers or lose people who were interested in mapping on the project because of the clan thing. So we broke off and we founded, I came up with this idea of founding a new quote unquote clan. Actually, kind of, it's sad because I was inspired by Chaos Core and the Jetsons, and I decided to make a new group based on those two groups. And I actually had, I don't know if you know the guy, Grymore. He was made the leader because I was already very unpopular by that time because I got into fights with too many people. I was friends with Mobius, etc. So it was like, well, I better not front this group even though I created it. So let's put Grymore as the front. So we did that, but the thing is, we actually made 2 other map packs, 2 new game modes, and they were very unsuccessful in getting out there. And that almost stopped me right there, like stopped me in my tracks between 2013 and 2014. Because if you notice, there was actually quite a large gap of nothing from us between between Velocity and Rage. It was actually these 2 packs and game modes that were very poorly received, and we received like tons and tons and tons of like really nasty criticism and sabotaging testing sessions, all that sort of thing. Blue Wizard and his crew like made it their life goals basically to like make a mockery of the game modes, etc. So we very nearly did just stop making maps entirely right then and there. But Dusk and I, we had a couple prototype extra CTF maps kicking around, so we decided to make a sequel to Velocity, basically. And then we were lucky enough to hook up with some more of the A3 crew, particularly Rusking and Razgriz, were essential in boosting Rage CTF to completion. Not in map count per se, but in interest and making it seem like it wasn't a wasted effort.
So basically, like, yeah, so you were struggling in this, like, okay, so what exactly did change? Because 2013, right? That's Rage CTF.
Nope.
14. Okay. 2014, Rage CTF. Then 15, Don't Be a Bitch remastered.
Yep.
Then Aeon DMV the next year.
Yep.
Progressive Duel.
Yep.
The next year. So, dude, you just hit the stride, and it just like everything you touched from that point was gold. So, how did that happen? Like all of a sudden, I mean, okay, these are maybe I'm just a fanboy because I gave all of those projects a Keck Award, but the point is they are genuinely good projects, and no one can actually counter my arguments there because they're actually getting played. They're actually Progressive Duel, Eon, and DBNB are fucking golden standard in their particular modes. Maybe Rage CTF fell through the cracks, I would say.
Because it came late.
Yes, for the CTF hype, right?
Yes, CTF by that time was like dying out. Rage CTF was the only project released since Velocity, and then Core CTF 2 only released a beta when Aeon was released. So, or when DBAB was released, I can't even remember. I mean, like nobody cares when a beta is released. So that's a huge shrug right there. Interestingly enough, Rage CTF was the most frustrating project I've ever mapped for, to be honest. There were several times that we almost just quit. All of us collectively. I distinctly remember one version of Rage CTF Beta 17A. Wow. We just we played the maps and we said every single change here was negative, and we had to roll back versions for that because it was just so bad. Everyone was so upset. During the development process, so many insults were hurled around. It was awful making it. That's why I will never make another CTF map, is because of Rage's development. It was just that jading as a process that it ended up with really good results, because it's like, okay, if you're not getting insulted, then the map's good finally. So basically the motivation was to make something good enough to avoid criticism. And that's not really a great way of working, but that's the reality of what Rage CTF was born in, and that's part of the reason why it's called Rage CTF.
Does that, like, do you feel some sort of sympathy for Chaos Core CTF?
Absolutely not. I feel zero sympathy for Rusking and any of his endeavors.
But dude, they had the same problems as your team.
Okay, well, here's the thing. With Rage CTF, this is a fantastic thing, because this ties right back into the fucking Doom raps and shit like that, right? Okay, so in Rage CTF, there was a bit of a drama between MXU and Chaos Core, and this was because, I don't know, Ruskin was missing in action, and Heaven Wraith, who is a mapper for both teams, he was complaining about that. And I said, well, why don't you find out what's going on with the project and maybe see if you can put your maps in Rage CTF. And Shane leaked this log to Rusking and reframed it and said, like, oh, Heaven Wraith is going to pull all his maps out of Chaos Core and put them in Rage. Well, Rusking flipped the fuck out.
Oh, good God.
Yeah. So that was the big drama. And if you've ever heard someone say, oh, Decay's smiling fatly, that's where that quote came from, because Rusking said to Heaven Wraith, Decay is just a guy with a fat smile on his face waiting for you to give him maps while doing nothing. So it's like, okay, well, whatever. So Heaven Wraith got booted out of Chaos Core, and all his maps got sent over to Rage. And it's like, well, thank you for this, an extra 5 maps, one of which had to be scrapped because it's
quite good maps, actually.
Well,
he's a very good mapper, I think.
The funny thing is that they all took a considerable amount of work to end up where they were. And when Rage was released, Rusking had like a campaign against Rage CTF, because it became a race, basically, between Rage CTF and Chaos Core, because there was shit like, oh, I would be playing Prive. Rusking would come into the server specifically to say, Core CTF 2 expected in December, and then leave. That's all he would say. So it became this race between Rage and Core. And the drama between those two groups, it was like, okay, this is now like a motivating factor, is to make better maps than them. So that's what it ended up being. And that's part of the reason why Rage got to where it was. So it's like, part of the insulting and like the criticism was, you can't let Core be better.
You know, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make it up. I say this all the time, but nobody writes this good. And Do mentioned what changed. So was it the motivation, after you released Rage CTF, did you just say, okay, well, we're going to be better than Chaos Core at everything?
Pretty much, yeah.
It was a pretty significant increase in output after Rage CTF.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So basically what happened after Rage was we released Rage, I want to say in June or something like that. And it was earlier in the year that Rage got released, because we were just like pretty quick on that, and since there was only 19 maps. But then at that time I was living on my own, and then I moved back with my parents, and then I moved back out again. And when I moved back out again on my own, Rusking was playing a nightly Last Man Standing, with a bunch of the TS crew, the A3 crew. So what we were doing he was developing Eon weapons at the time, so trying to rebalance Vanilla Doom.
Yep.
We were just going through a bunch of like old packs, old DM packs, new DM packs, whatever we could get our hands on to play like just Last Man Standing. And what happened is we had enough of trying to find good packs because they simply didn't exist. So we said, all right, fuck it, let's make our own maps. So we decided to stagger DBAB in like a 1-2-3 sort of deal. We made 16 maps in a week and a half. Like
Nice.
the production rate was astounding. So like DBAB 1 maps 1 through 10 were done in a week. Like they were just done. And then half of DBAB 2 was done within like the next week. It was crazy. So we were putting out like 10 maps a month, and it was like we were all competing with each other to make them better, basically. It's like there's a very clear path. If you look at the first 10 maps of DBAB, the next set, 11 through 20, are all much better from their respective mappers. And then from 21 to 33, even better. We were all saying, okay, well, what cool effects and whatnot can we do here? How can we one-up this other person? How can we kind of like compare to each other? So that it became kind of like an arms race within the group. And whether that was a good thing or a bad thing is debatable. But it ended up as a pretty solid pack. I was extremely proud of it at the time. And all the work that had gone in is like, we hadn't seen anything like this since projects like Sabbath Martyr, IG Pack, or anything like that. It's just been so long since there's been a pack like that made. So it was like, wow, we can actually do this.
That was actually like, yeah. Like when I was considering Rage CTF for a CAC award, that was like, okay, I have this clear comparison to the other existing ones, and I get to like compare. And okay, standard of the maps is clearly like something that I want to celebrate with the award. But with DBAB, it was like I haven't really played anything like this before much. I've played some TLMS, but not really. And the remastered version for FFA, like it's a game changer, basically. Like it's this own thing that just flies off into this a separate area. That's sure. It's like you follow your own rules. In the end, it's like something that's completely different from everything else. So yeah, I was completely 100% sure that was a lock for the CAC award. Well, interestingly enough, that same year I actually gave Chaos Core the CAC award. Because yeah, I still think Chaos Core has some pretty fucking cool CTF maps in it. So it's like, yeah, the war you waged on each other that actually produced good maps on both sides, actually.
The thing about DBAB is it revitalized an entirely dead game mode. And anyone who knows me knows that at night I get under the blankets and I touch myself thinking about LMS and TLMS. Like, that is my favorite thing in the world. And I remember joining in on some of those early testing sessions. I think I was hanging out with you guys around that time. And I think there was a lot of, it was like dedicated every single night that you guys were trying to figure out how you were going to make this, an epic WAD and something that, changes the perception of Last Man Standing. So, I don't know. I just think it's, for me, it was just like Du said, it was a game changer. And that's what, that in particular, obviously all the stuff that we've talked about, all the WADs that you've released before, but that in particular was something that really caught my eye. And then, moving your way into Progressive Duel. Now, I caught on to Progressive Duel a little late, so I was wondering what your motivation was behind that. I mean, how did you even? Because Progressive Duel, it's literally like the perfect name for it. It's progressive. It's not at all like the way that maps are made in the past, or the maps that we play on a regular basis. I mean, it's totally a different type of play style. So I was always been curious what your motivation was for developing that pack and utilizing a lot of stuff that you see in other FPS games and sort of making them or translating them into Doom.
Progressive Duel is really Russ King's baby. Interestingly enough, and not many people know or realize this, was that the original Progressive Duel, it was only 5 maps. It was just like a testing ground sort of thing. We developed those alongside DBAB, like in the early months of 2015, actually, in February, March, we released those first 5 Progressive Duel maps. And basically, it was a break from doing the DBAB maps. We were like, what else can we do? And Russ King wanted to expand on his visions of like the Eon DM, how he had like the NOS sort of deal, the new old school sort of thing going on. So he wanted to expand on that. And instead of doing something multi-port, sticking with Zandronum and like taking use of the 3D floors in particular. So that was really what that was. So the first foray into that was in 2015. Then after Aeon DM is when we decided to go back to Progressive 2. It was like, well, I'm pretty sure we can make some new maps. Like, we thought about it during Aeon's development, but it was like Aeon kind of took precedence. And we're like, okay, let's try and make some smaller maps for a change, because like Aeon was becoming like a bit of a burnout sort of thing. So it's like, how can we change gears? And I think the way Progressive kind of panned out was just trying, like, being experimental, really. That's what it came down to, was just doing a lot of experimenting. And it was a lot of dedicated play testing, and it was really fun. I really enjoyed the development cycle of Progressive Duel 2. And I mean, I'm looking forward to Progressive Duel 3, so it's going to be interesting to see how coming back to it 2 years later.
Are you foreshadowing
Progressive Duel 3?
Ooh.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about this.
No, I mean,
yeah. I know. I'm just kidding.
So basically, Progressive Duel. So Russ King's baby. I got that right in the Kakord article, by the way.
Yeah.
And so you were pretty heavily involved in that, because you're definitely a fan of the Quake approach to Doom mapping, right?
No. See here, when people say Quake approach, I mean, okay. Here's the thing. When people say
architectural,
I know, but here's the thing. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, your maps feel like Quake. You must take a lot of inspiration from Quake." I'm a Quake player. I really like your maps. It always makes me scratch my head, because I've never played Quake in my life. So,
nice.
So I really don't know.
So no, I mean, basically, so okay, you're not touched by the actual Quake style of mapping, but you lean the way of the 3D architecture, right?
Like just kind of like, well, see, you say Quake again. When I played FFA games back in the day, I was a player of Perfect Dark, Turok Rage Wars, all those sorts of things, Duke 64. All those games, they had like quote unquote 3D floors, but really just like room over room gameplay. So that makes more sense to me from a mapping logic standpoint. Now, right. It's interesting to do it in Doom, because 3D floors, like, they're not natural in Doom, right? They add a lot of square footage really fucking fast, and you have to be extraordinarily careful when you're mapping with 3D floors, because in a dual map in particular, just that little bit of extra square footage is enough to kill it. Like, it will destroy the pace and absolutely ruin the game.
Right.
It'll make it, like, even if you have a long line of sight. One of the original Progressive Duel maps, which was scrapped for Progressive Duel 2, it ended up back in DBAD, but it was that satellite map, and it was just so big that we would constantly run the timer out, and nobody, except for a couple people, enjoyed playing it, because even though it had all the essentials of Progressive Duel that we wanted, the item control, the 3D floors, the good-looking maps, it was just too much. And it was a good lesson in learning what 3D floors really meant in Doom and how you could use them in a one-on-one situation.
Right, yeah. The maps still have to be pretty compact. And
yeah.
That's actually what most of the Progressive Duel 2 maps manage to do. Like, we've ran some tournaments on them, and yeah, they're pretty good at what they're trying to convey. Like, yeah, you can't actually like, there's that one map that's kind of like, I want to like the map, but it's kind of on the too big side of this entire problem. Like, the one, which one is
CD
it?
CTF map 14? Is that the one you're talking about?
No, I mean, in the Duel 2.
I'm gonna guess it's Hatred's map. That's my guess.
The huge one with the multiple like square rooms all over, and really huge vertical differences. Holy shit! I will probably have to look that up.
Yeah, it's probably Hatred's map, Cyborg Arena. It's in space. It's got the BFG and a red armor and a soul sphere.
Yeah, probably that's the one.
Yeah, that is a very big map, and it's very interesting because Hatred was brought into the project as a favor to Rusking very late in the game. So he came at this really without having much experience in terms of like what our expectations were, what we've tried before, that sort of thing. So when we were actually recently just playing through all the maps again to see like what we could change for Prog 3, that sort of thing, is like we don't really have much to say about this map because it offers something so different than any of the other maps.
On the other hand, like at that point, Hatred, he was the guy who worked with Rust on the original Eon in 2012, which also managed to get a ACAC award from me. So it's like, yeah, he's not exactly. He's one of the best DM players of America of all time. Like Hatred was one of the best DM players ever. So like you don't exactly say that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
And
he produced some pretty good maps. It's just that,
like, it's not about he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he wasn't really part of the development process of Prog. So it's like he wasn't in tune with what we've already tried and what was generally seen as acceptable or not. He played a couple of maps and then he's like, all right, I have an idea. And then he hit us with this. And then we kind of refined it. And then we all looked at it. We're like, this is huge, but it offers something very different than the rest of the maps. So that was good. I call it the Durango 5 map of 1 of Prog Duel 2 because it just takes 20 years to play.
Oh, okay. Speaking of classic stuff, like okay, so you are basically seen in the DM mapping community, or like kind of like the acolyte of the new school design. You are the guy who will push the envelope, who will push the new school maps with 3D floors or whatever. But in 2017, the other project that won a CAC award was Pirhic. Would you like to comment about that? Because you weren't exactly in that like double negative. So like, yeah, you actually were involved with that project, right?
Yeah. Like I
And that's a
I looked
classic
on
one.
on Doomworld one day. I'm like, what the hell is this? Check it out. It's a really nice set. I'm like, okay, well, let's play this and like see how it goes. And I'm a huge fan of that map pack, and I'm very fond of it. And the development is like, okay, I have some suggestions for you here, there, implement these sorts of things. And then I remember calling you to come into the server, and it's like, oh yeah, we could do this, that, and this other thing here. And the maps all ended up like way stronger for it. And it's
By
like,
the
I don't
way,
want to take any.
the actual author of the map set is a master who made the classic Onslaught series. So
Yeah, like he really knows what he's doing, and like I
yes.
don't want to take anything away from him, but it's like my feedback is definitely not exclusive to New School. It's definitely applicable to any map set. I feel like that has to do more with the way that I think about maps and mapping, and that's more on like the psychology of flow and like getting people engaged with the map itself, rather than just like, oh, I think this might be good, or I only understand one form of play, for example.
Yeah, I was kind of like taken by surprise that you were so captivated by Peric, because it's like definitely a very classic style of DM WOD. It's absolutely pure FFA madness with like not much of new school sensibilities. So when we actually started to like refine those maps, that was kind of like a surprise that yeah, I'm actually working with Decay on a DM, pretty much an old school map set. So yeah.
Yeah, but you'd never ever catch me making an old school map set.
I guess yeah, that's the difference. Like you wouldn't make these maps, you just like them, right? When they actually appear.
If they're good.
Well, you know, I think
maybe yeah, that's probably the difference for like Peric 1 and Peric 2. Not
well, that's also differences in feedback, because as far as I understand, Hobo got a lot more feedback from people like Killstrike, and Killstrike doesn't even have a brain. So I mean, I don't understand how he could possibly give feedback on a map.
We're getting into like the other people territory, and like yeah, it's just well, basically yeah. I wasn't that thrilled with Peric 2 as well. Let's just keep it there.
Well, I think your advice or your critiquing of that certainly brought a different element to having someone like you bring that or bring your expertise to an old school map set. Probably made it a little bit more modern, and that's the thing that I really enjoy about not only DBAB but also Progressive Duel, is that you are able to essentially create two WODs that also created its own sort of gameplay, because nothing like those two things had ever really been seen before. And I think that leads up very nicely, and I would never forget about it. I'd be remiss if I forgot about it. But the masterpiece that I consider Neon DM, and I mean, I think the layouts are probably your most experimental yet, but also the texture set. I mean, anyone can throw in 45 colors or whatever it is and put it on a wall, and oh look, this map's colorful. But the way that it's done, in contrast to the layouts, is really tasteful, and I can only imagine how much time it took to make it that way. But I think this is now your third project for me, your third project in a row that has really changed the way that we look at playing multiplayer Doom. I think these things you could almost call them their own game modes. It's just I really enjoyed them, and so tell me about, because I don't know. I just know that I saw screenshots, and the project Neon DM. I need to know more about it because I'm obsessed with it, and I think this is something that also, like you said, you see people will go and play this on their own, and there's a reason for that. So I want to know as much as I can about this because the layouts are, I don't know, I've never seen anything like them before.
Neon is it's an interesting project for a variety of reasons. It was one of those things where it's like we got to go back in time because like it's very chronological. So let's flip back a bit first to Aeon Deathmatch, because Aeon is really the precursor to Neon, and that is also like a sequel directly to DBAB. What happened was we were playing DBAB a ton, and as we like filtered more maps out of the rotation or whatever, or like we would play at like, I don't know, 25 of the 33 maps on a regular basis, and Razgriz and I were like, we need more maps, so we decided to start up Aeon Deathmatch as like DBAB DLC, and that kind of just caught on. And the question we asked ourselves was, what were the strengths and negatives of DBAB? How can we improve on them? And that's why Aeon ended up being the way it is, which is arguably, like, I know modesty is always a virtue, but fuck it, man. Like, Aeon Deathmatch is one of the best deathmatch map sets ever made for Doom. Like, I have no bones saying that. Like, it is a fucking fantastic fact. I'm very proud of not just my maps, but everyone's contributions to it. And the testament is found in the fact that it's played all the time. Mechanix and DP Thanatos, they took it for Quake Champions Doom Edition, and I said, they asked me, can we edit the maps and make them playable like specifically for this game mode? I said, go ahead, and it was like wonderfully received. That's a testament to just how good Aeon is. In saying that, it's like at the end of Aeon, we were burned the fuck out. We had definitely had enough, but it was insisted to start up Neon. And the name Neon was actually just a play on Aeon, which was a play on Aeon Deathmatch. Literally, Aeon is like, if you look at the title pick of Aeon, it is a troll to Rust King that bugs him to this day. So there was that. And then we just decided to stick with that scheme. Like, I joked about Neon Deathmatch, and Raz just kind of ran with it. Neon is his baby, really. And it was interesting because like I didn't really want to do anything for it. I was pretty well burned out, and the first couple of map submissions that we got, like, the layouts were experimental that you see, but like if you go look at the first like 10 betas or whatever, the layouts are even more insane, and it was too insane actually. Things just got like absolutely out of control, and it really was not good. And what we had to do is we had to go back and we had to say like, okay, how are we going to make Neon stand apart from Aeon and DBAB? Well, our answer was found in changing the palette. It was like, okay, well, let's make it more colorful, because I know Rust King, he was lamenting the fact that there's no true color software renderer, which I'm going to do a shill for Odmex right here and say the fact that they have a true color software renderer is fantastic. It definitely would make life a lot easier than having to screw around with changing textures, like doing all these crazy edits to make it actually appear good in the software renderer. I'm saying that, a lot of work had to be done doing that, and it took up not only a lot of time, but a lot of people's patience too. And some of the texture combinations that we would get, the color combinations were just, to use Du's word, garish, beyond even what I could comprehend. Like it was just out of control. And so this was in the beginning of 2017, and a lot of us just gave up, to be honest, and we started looking back at Progressive Duel 2 instead. There was another group of guys who had taken Progressive Duel 2, rebranded it as Pro Duel. They specifically omitted the hub map, which had like author credits and whatnot. They were talking about like screwing around with the maps and the spawns, and Prog 2 wasn't like complete, and it was in beta, and these guys were like trying to run tournaments and shit on it. So basically we were pushed, kind of forced to finish Progressive Duel 2 before the maps got spread as incomplete and bad. So that was kind of like a big rush to finish that. And when we turned our eyes back to Neon, nobody wanted to do it. So there was a gigantic lapse in time there. And like, you think Neon is a pack full of coherent themes and whatnot. It wasn't originally like that, not at all. And the testing was a lot different. The mapping strength was not a fraction of what it was. It was a shit show. It was really fucking bad. And if you look inside the WOD, there's actually a couple text memos that Raz and I left detailing this process. We came back to it, like Raz was just plodding along all by himself pretty much for, I don't know, 8 months. And then I came to him later and I said, look, we should just like split the pack, cut our losses, and like just try and get something out and just like get it out there, call it a day. So yeah,
I can just imagine like early 2018 memo from Decay, like we're changing Neon DM to Vaporwave. Everyone get the memo.
Yeah.
and you just send out the Space DM9 demo of the map from SL.
Yeah, Space DM9. That was a huge inspiration for me. And I mean, like, you can see the last map that I made for Aeon Deathmatch, Techno Junkie, was like the prototype where I started experimenting with some of the motifs and whatnot that Space DM used. So that was kind of like the precursor to what things were going to look like. But like when we decided to split the pack, it was basically just I helped Raz kind of like stay on track, and from there we kind of like reformed the project. It was sad because you know what, like this is something that's been going on since the creation of MXU. Was every project that we've done, I have publicly posted and asked if anyone wanted to join the project, if they wanted to contribute, and we never ever get anybody. Not one. And the same thing happened with Neon. It's like, you would think by this point, it's like, we had Rage CTF, we had Velocity, DBAB, we had Aeon, we had all these things saying, like, we're not just fucking around, we're not these nobodies just making a map set. It's like, we know what we're doing. Nobody would commit to anything. It was really shitty, and it was really discouraging. And I say in the memo, it's like, Neon DM was something that is like I didn't want to do, to something I loathed doing. Like I just could not do it anymore, to something I ended up being very proud of. And it took a complete restructuring in the WOD, the approach that we took, because it was like there was tons of inner drama, lots of people getting mad at each other, leaving the project, leaving each other, just petty vendettas, so that sort of thing. And then it was like, okay, we need to make this stand apart. What are we going to do? So it was, number one was all the colors. Number two was try to make new layouts that really focused on like using verticality. And I think to that degree, we were pretty successful.
Have you tried being less toxic to the community?
I have actually, and it never works. So at this point, my reaction is more or less, I don't give a fuck anymore, because I tried playing that nice game and it still got me nowhere. So fuck you all. I don't care. Eat shit and die. Anyway, You can take that out of the recording. Yeah,
No,
that's a little
I'm
cut
not
right
going to do
there.
that.
2020.
Yeah.
Ichi and
Yeah.
I.
Yeah, when you see the project thread for Delta QDM, you can just quote me on that. Anyway, yeah, it took
Make
a lot
Decay
of.
angry again.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not doing anything for Delta Q. Sorry, Raz, but that's up to you. Um, yeah, it's just like it. It was a struggle. Neon DM was a struggle to completion. It really was, and I'm glad it ended up the way it did because it's like it supports. It's the most ambitious project that I've ever worked on, to be honest. It supports vanilla. It supports a brand new game mode, the Neon Hunter mode. Supports natively QCDE and Death Foretold. Supports vanilla, which means it has like mod compatibility. You can run it with whatever weapon set you want. And then, of course, if you want to be memers, if you put skill 0, every spawn is a BFG. So have fun, like knock yourselves out.
So what's this Neon Hunter mode you're talking about?
So Neon Hunter mode, we actually added an extra skill level, just so we could do this. Is we you and I we had talked about this Predator mode tournament that you ran on Z Damon several years back,
Right.
because you were making a commentary on how fucking dark the map was, in particular Project Darklight, and I took this idea and it was like, you know what? I wonder what we could do further with this idea, and with some team speculation and like there was some other drama going on at the time. It's like, okay, well, how about this Predator mode where it's like you get an invisibility sphere, but it takes away all your vanilla weapons and it gives you all the Eon weapons. So you're kind of like advanced. You get health and armor like a Predator. You get a lightning gun. You get a rail gun, the buff chainsaw, and a grenade launcher. And those weapons are not available to anyone else on the map. So you get to be this Neon Hunter. You get to hide in the darkness of the maps because they are overall pretty dark. And you get to stomp on everybody with increased speed, durability, and new weapons. I think it was a pretty interesting idea to try and come up with something unique.
And the other guys just die to this evil motherfucker.
Yeah, pretty much. You get torn up pretty quick. The lightning gun is so strong, and if you have nothing to counteract it, really, then you're toasted. But yeah, it was interesting because we added that in the last week, like in the final week of production. We're like, let's throw this in, go for it.
Well, we should probably run that shit in some tournament just to see how it works.
Yeah, I mean, it'd definitely be fun for the FFA. You get 4 people in there. You get 1 Neon Hunter and 3 regular people. It would definitely be interesting.
I can tell you that the original Predator tournament I ran was one of the most fun tournaments I've ever run. Like people were so fucking scared about that. Like just every time someone picked up the invisibility sphere, that was just the other guy was just running into a corner and just spamming plasma. It was like the fucking Alien movies, like you know I'm just getting cornered. They're just coming at me, and it was brilliant. So I definitely support that mode.
The theme of your Doom mapping career, maybe your Doom career in general, is in the face of such adversity, you still manage to find inspiration to create things that are different. And
when you're saying mapping in the face of all this, sometimes I do ask myself, what's the point? Because I mean, like I said, I've never gotten extra people to work on the projects. I always wonder, is it because of me that people don't sign up? And I mean, I'm putting this to the test by letting Razgriz run Delta Q. That's going to be all on him. I don't know what he plans on doing with that. But as for whatever new DM maps that I'm making, originally I was going to say Neon's the end of it, but with Pro Duel 3 and the MXU collection coming out, I guess I'm slated for a couple more maps to do.
MXU collection. That's the first time I hear about that. What's that about?
Basically, it's taking DBAB, Aeon, Prague, and Neon and throwing them all in one PK3. And it's not just throwing them in there, but also kind of like doing minor tweaks and revisions here or there, problems that we know exist, whether that's like gameplay balance or technical issues, that sort of thing. But with some of the overlapping maps, like for example in DBAB Remastered, Map 01 of DBAB Remastered is actually Pro Duel Map 02. And Pro Duel Map 02, like that map Fade was made for Pro Duel first. It was thrown into DBAB Remastered to replace a map that was not as good before. So that's an overlap. We end up with 95 maps, and you're telling me that it's like you're gonna release a set with 95 maps? No. That's not gonna work. It's got to be a nice even 100 maps. So the MXU collection is gonna be those 4 packs together with 5 additional new maps.
Like you can still add like Rage CTF, go for 150. No.
Oh no, man, if I added Rage and Velocity, Rage and Velocity, cut them in half.
Yeah.
No, you could have them as a TDM. Use team starts only. There you go.
No takers for this offer.
So before we go, I'd like to know what your current state, your current opinion on your opinion on the current state of the community is a better way to say it. I know we've had conversations about this many times.
It's very interesting. The MDF, as it stands right now, given that I haven't stepped foot in this Discord for quite some time, actually seems to be more of what I'd envisioned for my own Discord, which is interesting enough. I could consider the way that things have been going in my Discord, the effort to centralize a bunch of different players, as a failure, to be honest. I think what the MDF is doing is quite good. I mean, there's a lot of positives going on. You have a lot of different game modes being played. You got the weekly events. I'm hard put to find a negative, really, and that's great. That's fantastic. My view on the multiplayer community, what needs to be done, what needs to change, is honestly what drives Doom in general is content creation. There is no shortage of single player packs being put out. There is no shortage of interest in that. And I think what we need is more multiplayer packs. And what I'm afraid of is something like what Razgris said to me a couple of days ago, is that stuff like Aeon and Neon kind of like, it shows that the standard is up here, and a lot of people do not want to put in that much effort. And so they just don't do anything at all. Or it's like they don't want to try. They don't want to put any additional effort in. They don't want to make things look as good. They don't want to put in that much time, because it's like, it's work. It's a lot of hard work, and a lot of people do not want to put that effort in. But I think what is most essential to the multiplayer community is content creation, because the more content that can be made, the more interest that will be sustained. I think two things stand out to me. First off is compilation WODs. Sure, Duel 40 is fantastic. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a great WOD. It brings everything into one place. But at the same time, a compilation WOD, whether it's CTF or Duel, kind of dissuades anyone from making like their own little pack, because nobody's going to play anything other than the compilation.
Right, yeah.
That's kind of a negative force, in my opinion. And one thing that stood out to me in the collection for Odomex, because I hadn't played Duel 40 in quite some time, but there was a collection in Odomex, I forget what it was called, but it separated the maps in decades. So we had maps from the 90s, maps from the 2000s, and maps from the 2010s. And it was really interesting to me that you could easily draw a line, like a graph. You could graph this shit out. That the maps got progressively less fun from the 90s maps to the 2010s.
Ouch.
It's like I could say to myself, I enjoy, let's say there was 10 maps in the 90s. I would enjoy 8 or 9 out of those 10. In the 2000s, maybe 5 or 6. In the 2010s, 1, maybe 2. It was really interesting for me to see that the attempts to replicate old school kind of play was really not good, because I think a lot of the old school maps were not built on technicalities, whereas a lot of new old school maps are built on, like, you have exactly 2 seconds to get to the BFG. If you don't make it in 2 seconds, you are fucked. You have like 3 seconds to get from here to here. You have exactly 1028 units of space, all that sort of thing. Like, it's too technical, and I think that has destroyed a lot of the charm and playability of maps that was just not present in the 90s maps that were thrown haphazardly together.
That's a really interesting, because it's like when you clue Perhig into it, that's kind of like what both of us actually loved, because it reversed this trend. Like, Perhig was kind of like this genuine map set that wasn't trying to be too clever about this old school map ordering. Like, you didn't have to run for the BFG in 2 seconds. You didn't have to do all these old school tricks or whatever, like being really clever about your movement. It was just kind of like a pretty fun FFA area, and that was it. So I guess that's a positive. When you say, like, you have to run to a BFG in 2 seconds because it's designed that way, I don't necessarily see that as a negative, because to me it means there's some effort to make a map that could be one of the competitive maps, like that could be played at like QuakeCon with like the top 10 players of the world.
Yeah,
Well,
I just think the technicality bit is gotten too out of hand, and I think the best word to characterize a lot of modern maps is sterile.
Yes, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like, people are trying too hard to replicate the stuff that in the past happened naturally. Like, it was just stuff that happened. People mapped naturally, and they failed a lot. And out of all of that massive amount of failure, you had a couple of positives. And now people are trying to replicate those positives, and it's just not the same. People should be just trying the same way, like just spamming ideas, and maybe some of those will be a good DM map. But the way it is right now, like trying to replicate what is considered a good map, is not going to work.
I'm more than happy to provide feedback on projects, and literally anytime I see a new DM map or new DM project, I'm the first person to give like full feedback on like whatever they've made. I'm more than happy to help facilitate more people making DM maps or whatever PvP kind of maps that they want.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I think if I had any personal suggestions to people who haven't heard of, some of these projects that Decay has been a part of, that they really should check them out, because they're part of a new era of Doom and they're pushing things forward. And it's because of people like Decay, and the other mappers that are really keeping this game alive. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me.